Adam should come out, and Kathy. I like both of them a lot. Women can there's no transgender people going to play in the WNBA. If you don't like it, kick rocks. We're not going to discuss it anymore. And Ennis is trying to get attention because listen, if he did all the operation things, we're not doing that either. The WNBA is for women. And listen, this is the last time we're going to discuss it. We're not going to turn it over to the fools on the internet. We're not going to turn it over to Congress and things like that. The WNBA is for women only, period.
Charles Barkley stepping into a legal battle over the WNBA was not on anybody's bingo card. But then came the controversy surrounding Natasha Cloud and claims that men could somehow be allowed into the league. Suddenly, the debate exploded, and Barkley reportedly decided enough was enough. But what exactly pushed him toward a lawsuit? What role did Cloud allegedly play? And is there something even bigger hiding behind this WNBA storm?
Listen, Section 13, right? Article 13, Section 1 says if you identify as a woman, then you're allowed to play.
So you're identifying as a woman tonight?
I identify as a woman, sure, yes.
Okay.
So I can play.
But they're never going to let you play.
Why not? I mean, that's the rule. That's the rule that they put, and I'm just following the rules. If they ever come out and say, "Okay, we are changing the rules," I respect their decision. I will, follow the rules. But right now, if you identify as a woman, you're allowed to play, and I am identifying as a woman, and I should be allowed to play.
The WNBA has spent years fighting for respect, bigger television deals, better salaries, larger audiences, and the kind of cultural relevance that once seemed impossible. Then, just when the league finally found itself at the center of the sports world, a completely different controversy arrived and decided to kick the front door open.
Never a dull moment around the WNBA. I just got to be honest, man. This whole situation involving men playing in the league just keep getting better by the day, and it's turning into a small Netflix series. We got NBA legend Charles Barkley demanding the WNBA do what's right. Kathy, Adam Silver, the whole executive board need to confirm that there is no men playing in this league. They got to do what they got to do to verify that it's only women playing in this league.
It started with a question that should have been simple. Who exactly is eligible to play in the WNBA? That question became even more explosive when former NBA player Enes Kanter publicly declared that he identified as a woman and intended to enter the 2027 WNBA draft. Another former NBA player, Royce White, made a similar declaration, and suddenly a debate that had previously existed, mostly in the background, was standing directly in the middle of the basketball court.
Natasha Cloud found some way to make last night's game all about her. As the Chicago Sky are getting crushed in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter, Natasha Cloud decides to crash out on a fan courtside. That fan was wearing a shirt that said woman on it, and Natasha Cloud couldn't bear the sight. All the horror. So Natasha Cloud starts approaching this, and this was a woman sitting courtside. Natasha Cloud starts approaching this female sitting courtside and starts going off, screaming at them, cursing at them, yelling at them. And somehow this female fan is the one that gets kicked out.
Then came the confrontation. Enes Kanter showed up courtside for a game between the Chicago Sky and Indiana Fever, wearing a shirt with a message defining a woman as an adult human female. Chicago Sky guard Natasha Cloud noticed him. Emotions exploded, and what should have been a basketball game suddenly looked like a political debate that had accidentally purchased courtside seats. Security intervened, Kanter was removed from the arena, and the entire situation became even bigger.
Of course, these players are triggered because they want, by God, men to be allowed to compete in women's sports. They literally want to destroy their own sport. Enes Kanter and Royce White are trying to make a point because the WNBA refuses to define clearly what a woman is. He was wearing a shirt, woman, noun, adult, human, female. He wore that shirt. This was Natasha Cloud going at Enes Kanter last night.
Then Charles Barkley entered the conversation, and Barkley was not interested in dancing around the issue. The important point, however, is that despite the dramatic headlines and rumors circulating online, there is no verified evidence that Charles Barkley has filed a lawsuit against the WNBA or Natasha Cloud. What Barkley has actually done is publicly criticize the leadership of both the NBA and WNBA for allowing confusion surrounding eligibility to grow into a full-blown controversy. His argument was essentially straightforward. If the WNBA already has rules governing who is eligible to compete in the league, then why did league officials allow such an important question to become so confusing in the first place? That is where this story becomes far more interesting, because the biggest problem may not be Enes Kanter Freedom, Natasha Cloud, Charles Barkley, or even the broader debate over who should be allowed to compete in women's professional basketball. The larger issue is straightforward, especially considering that the WNBA is, after all, the Women's National Basketball Association. The answer would seem to be sitting right there in the name, and nobody should need to organize a league-wide treasure hunt to figure out what the organization was created to represent.
I always support the gay community. I always support the transgender community. I got none but love and respect for gay people and transgender people. But under no circumstances do I think men should play against women. Zero. I'm disappointed in Adam Silver and Kathy, the commissioner. First of all, you can't let stupid stuff go out to the internet, which is one of the worst things that ever happened to the world. They should have come out 2 weeks ago before all this, because people are looking for attention.
However, the controversy begins when people move beyond that first sentence and ask a more specific question about how the league officially determines who qualifies as a woman for eligibility purposes. That is where the publicly available language becomes considerably less detailed. The WNBA's collective bargaining agreement states that only women are eligible to play, but publicly available language does not appear to provide a detailed explanation of how questions involving gender identity or sex-based eligibility are handled in every possible circumstance. Once that gap became part of the public conversation, Enes Kanter Freedom and Royce White stepped directly into the middle of it. The WNBA, however, reportedly determined that neither former NBA player would be eligible for the 2027 draft, and that decision immediately created an entirely new set of questions. If they are not eligible, then on what specific basis was that determination made? And why was that explanation not already clear enough to prevent this controversy from exploding in the first place? That may sound like a simple question, but it quickly became the center of the entire argument. If the WNBA states that only women can compete, while the public policy does not fully explain how eligibility is determined in situations that challenge or test that definition, critics are naturally going to ask what happens when someone deliberately pushes the language to its limits.
He is not being banned. Y'all want to know why he ain't being banned? Because there is a loophole within their clause to where men could play in the league. Why do they have that gap there? This league has been around for 30-some years, bro. They've been around for a nice little minute. Why is it small loopholes in there? Who is a man already possibly playing in the league? That is going to destroy this league if it comes out. See, nobody's thinking about this. Have there ever been a trans man playing inside the league? Now, I'm not digging deep into the history of the WNBA, but if some of y'all want to do that, go dig.
That is exactly what Kanter Freedom appeared to do. And whether people agree with his motives or strongly disagree with them, the controversy exposed a communication problem that the league can no longer simply ignore. This is where Natasha Cloud becomes an important part of the story. From her perspective, the situation was not simply a technical debate about how a basketball rule should be interpreted. She appeared to view Kanter Freedom's presence, his shirt, and his public campaign as part of a broader attack on a community she believes deserves support and protection. That perspective helps explain why the confrontation became emotional, rather than remaining a quiet disagreement about league automatically cancels out the other. That is also where Charles Barkley appeared to become increasingly frustrated. Barkley has expressed his opposition to biological males competing against biological females in the WNBA. But his criticism was not directed only at the individuals involved in the controversy. He also questioned the leadership of the league and suggested that commissioners should have addressed the issue earlier instead of allowing the situation to grow into a controversy that quickly spread across social media and national sports discussions.
Who would have thought, guys, in the year of our Lord 2026, that mankind still does not know what a woman is, or a man for that matter? Now, guys, throughout my life, I thought this was a basic common knowledge. Everyone knew what a male was. Everyone knew what a female was. If you still don't know, I highly recommend you go and watch the 1990 Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Kindergarten Cop, because a 5-year-old teaches people on basic biology. Boys have a girls have a.
At this point, the entire situation has become so complicated that the internet has essentially turned a question about player eligibility into a full-scale cultural circus, complete with politicians, athletes, commentators, activists, and thousands of people who suddenly discovered women's basketball 5 minutes ago and somehow decided they were qualified to rewrite the rulebook before lunch. The WNBA has found itself in a position where almost every possible response creates another argument. If the league refuses to provide more detail, critics claim that the rules remain unclear. If the league provides additional clarification, supporters and opponents of different policies immediately begin debating what somebody plans to pass at the microphone again. The most fascinating part of this entire controversy remains the argument surrounding Enes Kanter Freedom himself. Some people have asked why he should be declared ineligible if the publicly available language simply states that players must be women, without providing detailed public explanations covering possible situation involving gender identity and eligibility. Others have argued that Kanter Freedom's declaration was clearly intended as a political statement designed to expose what he believes is an inconsistency in the rules, and that the WNBA had every reason to reject his attempt to enter the draft.
Enes Kanter Freedom and what he did the other day at a WNBA game between the Chicago Sky and the Indiana Fever. In attendance for the game, Enes Kanter Freedom was wearing a shirt supposedly in support of women. And here's the scene right here for you to see for yourself. It was a messy situation, to say the least. And it's obviously something that's going to be politicized because there's a lot of people that have feelings about this.
Both sides then found themselves arguing over a problem that, at least from the public perspective, the league had not explained in enough detail before the controversy erupted. That is precisely why Barkley's criticism matters. The more important question is whether a major professional sports league can leave a significant eligibility issue open to competing interpretations and then appear surprised when someone deliberately decides to test those interpretations. That is the contradiction sitting at the center of this entire drama. If the rules are already clear, then the league should be able to explain them clearly and consistently. If the existing language leaves room for confusion, then the league should days examining legal language as though the WNBA collective bargaining agreement has suddenly become the final chapter of a detective novel. The league has indicated that there are no immediate eligibility matters affecting current WNBA competition, and that point is important because there has not been a transgender woman competing on a WNBA roster. From the league's perspective, there may therefore be no immediate on-court situation requiring an emergency policy change.
Against the regime over there, he's spoken against the atrocities that government has done. He's not allowed back in Turkey. So in a league full of activists like the WNBA, a real activist, it's actually crazy who it is, who's the one putting the WNBA on Front Street, a real person who jeopardized his entire career, not allowed back in his home country, blackballed from the NBA for criticizing China, criticizing LeBron James, criticizing all those relationships. It's actually quite crazy that he's the one that's putting the WNBA on blast. And in a league full of activists, the real activist is the one that's doing all of this.
However, the controversy has demonstrated that there is still a significant communication problem. A rule does not have to be challenged during an actual basketball game before people begin questioning what that rule means. Enes Kanter Freedom did not need to step onto a WNBA court to expose the confusion surrounding the public discussion of eligibility. His declaration alone was enough to force the question into the spotlight. Natasha Cloud's confrontation then transformed what might have remained a policy debate into a highly visible cultural moment. Charles Barkley's criticism of league leadership added another layer to the story, and suddenly the controversy was no longer simply about a former someone such as Kanter had the opportunity to turn an unresolved question into a national spectacle. That criticism becomes particularly significant when considering the current state of the WNBA. The league has worked for years to build a larger audience, attract major television deals, develop recognizable stars, and establish itself as one of the fastest-growing properties in professional sports.
Woke WNBA guys, they still don't know what a woman is, despite woman actually being in the name WNBA. However, though, we know that when it comes to two quote-unquote transgenders in Ennes, Kanter and Royce White, the WNBA has told them, no, you're not eligible for the WNBA. But maybe, just maybe, guys, they'll actually open up the door to other people identifying as a woman, just not those two because of politics.
That success, however, also brings a completely different level of scrutiny. Every unresolved controversy becomes larger when millions of people are watching, and every unclear policy can quickly become a national debate. The WNBA of several years ago might have been able to address a confusing policy question quietly and move forward without attracting much attention. The modern WNBA does not have that luxury. A single confrontation can become a viral video within minutes, and a policy question can quickly turn into a debate involving people who do not even agree on the meaning of the original rule. That is the world the league now participating in a basketball game when the controversy arrived at the arena. From her perspective, Kanter presence and public messaging represented an attack on people and causes she supports. From Kanter perspective, he appeared to be testing what he believes is an inconsistency within the league's eligibility framework. From Barkley's perspective, league leadership allowed the situation to become unnecessarily complicated because clearer boundaries had not been established before the controversy exploded. From the perspective of many fans, the entire situation has become frustrating because nearly everyone involved appears to believe that the other side is refusing to answer the most obvious question.
All I have to say is 2 points. Number one is that I told you so. There are people that say, we just want to talk basketball. We just want to play basketball, whatever. You don't get to decide for constituencies. They do. You don't get to decide for fans. They do. You don't get to decide for paying customers. They do. And if these are the kind of things that they want to talk about, that they want to be insatiated over, that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. I'm talking to all the analysts and the pundits and the reporters and everybody else in between out there. You don't get to dictate for the paying audience what they like and what they dislike.
So where does the WNBA go from here? The most straightforward answer is that the league needs to communicate more clearly about how player eligibility is determined. The WNBA does not have to solve every political, cultural, or social debate taking place in America, and it certainly cannot force every politician, athlete, activist, commentator, or internet troll to agree with the same policy. What it can do is clearly explain its own rules. That appears to be the position the WNBA currently finds itself in, and it is why the Enes Kanter episode became far larger than a single courtside confrontation. What exactly does the WNBA's eligibility language mean in practice? Why was the public explanation not more specific before this controversy emerged? Why did the situation have to escalate into a major national debate before so many people began demanding clearer answers? And why did was allowed to develop? He appeared to view Kanter actions as attention-seeking, but he also argued that the commissioners had allowed the situation to become more complicated than it needed to be. That distinction matters because the larger controversy should not be reduced to a personal war between Charles Barkley and Natasha Cloud.
Enes Kanter is going about this in a weird way, but he's actually doing a service to women to protect women. And the audacity of people going against him to protect y'all is nuts to me. Natasha Cloud ran up to Enes Kanter in the middle of the third quarter because he had a shirt on that said woman. Now, like, he's in support of women for women in sport.
By that point, the problem is no longer simply a question about league policy. It has become a spectacle, and the WNBA now finds itself at an important crossroads. The league can continue to argue that there are no immediate eligibility issues affecting current competition and treat the controversy as an external distraction. Even if no transgender player is currently competing in the league, the broader question of eligibility has now become firmly established within the public conversation, and it is unlikely to disappear simply because everyone would prefer to return to discussing basketball. Charles Barkley may not have filed the lawsuit suggested by viral headlines, but his criticism still landed on what many observers see as the league's biggest vulnerability in this controversy. Until the WNBA closes that gap with a clear and publicly understandable explanation of its eligibility standards, the debate is likely to continue. The headlines will continue to appear, and every new controversy will bring everyone back to the same uncomfortable question. If the rules are already clear, then why does it seem as though so many people are still reading them in completely different ways?